You are now tuning into the Resilient Podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of the Resilient Podcast. I am your host, Rob Aurelius, and today we're going to talk about the middle. And when I say the middle, I'm talking about often overlooked season between heartbreak and healing, between silence and clarity. The in-between moments of our lives that rarely make it to highlight reels, but are where true transformation quietly unfolds. People don't talk about the middle. So I want to open up to you all on this episode about the emotional weight of being suspended in time, no longer broken, but not yet whole, because that's where I feel where I'm at right now. So I want to speak about growth. And to me, growth isn't loud, because the lessons that come, they come very slowly. And the kind of self-love that requires more patience than celebration is very important. So, in my last episode, I had a guest. His name was Ron Gerini. And, Ron focused on the boldness of, vulnerability, honesty, reflection. And, this episode is not a goodbye or a beginning. It's actually a powerful pause. And in that pause, I want to invite all my listeners to join me in this episode in asking yourself, what does resilience look like when life isn't moving fast, but your heart still is? So we're going to talk about that. And I want to set the tone with a poetic reflection on the middle, where, the space where you've outgrown your past, but haven't yet reached your future, right? So I want to share how this season of where I'm at in the healing journey, it's tested me. It's centered me, and it taught me pretty much how to sit still without feeling stuck. So first and foremost, I want to talk about my recent trip to Pittsburgh that happened last week. I went to Pittsburgh for a few days. And my first flight, see, I'm already spilling the beans here. My first flight, which was to Pittsburgh, was delayed by a few hours from JFK. And I didn't get to Pittsburgh originally when I was supposed to. I got to Pittsburgh, about an hour or two after. And overall, the trip was great. I met out there with my friends, Justin and also Henry. And, Justin is a very good friend of mine. And we went to WWE Monday Night Raw at the PPG Paints Arena. There was also a double taping Well, I wouldn't say it necessarily double taping, but there was a taping of SmackDown that night because, July 4th, which was last week, they gave the talent the time off because they had just came from Saudi Arabia a few days before that. So, they were on the road for a while, overseas, and, they just gave them a break. So I had a very good time overall, like out there. I mean, it rained a little bit. The weather was a little crazy for the most part, but I had a very, very good time, especially in Monday Night Raw. And then when I came back from Pittsburgh, because I was supposed to actually shoot this episode before I came back to New York, but there was so many delays, and I think my flight was delayed almost 3 hours to come back to New York. They were talking about bad weather, and folks, last week, I had to reach out to my friends out in Florida, and also around those areas because this new hurricane, the severe weather was really bad. And, this 4th of July was very interesting for a lot of people. It was definitely interesting for me. But overall, I had a very good time in Pittsburgh, a very, very good time in Pittsburgh. And I just want to let everybody know that the next episode 36, and I don't talk about the next episode in the beginning of this new episode, but the next episode is going to be very interesting. So I want you all to look forward to that because I definitely look forward to it. But folks, before I get into it, I just also wanted to mention that it is now the month of July. I have a beautiful story coming out this month with someone very special about resilience on the Resilience Tribune, which is right here on the bottom, www.resilienctribune.com. If you have a story to share with us, please submit it to info@resilienctribune.com. Everyone at least has a story about resilience. Sometimes people say, like, what's resilience? And then when I explain it to them and whatnot, they're like, oh, I got a few stories about that. When I moved to my new office, the owner of the new office space was asking me, what's your podcast about? When I told her I did a podcast, and I was like, resilience. And she was like, oh, I can talk to you about resilience for a long time. And I said, I'm sure you can. So hopefully someday, well, not hopefully, someday I'll have her on the podcast. I look forward to hearing her stories about resilience. But over the weekend, I spoke with a friend because I was telling them the whole situation about the flight to Pittsburgh, everything that's been going on. I even spoke to them about the subject about the middle, like where I'm at currently in this breakup journey. And, this person, who is a very good friend of mine, they were like, hey, listen, we have a lot of conversations about resilience and whatnot, and you'd never touched that subject on your podcast. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, we talk about resilience all the time, but you've never shared any of the questions that I asked you. And I was like, oh, so you've been paying attention. You've been watching all the other episodes. It's like, yeah. So can I ask you some questions so that you can feature it on the next episode of the podcast? And I was like, oh, okay, sure, no problem. So shout out to my friend Jeff. He asked me these questions during 4th of July weekend. We were talking about a few things. And, normally the people that ask me these questions, they will say, don't mention my name on the podcast. But in this case, Jeff was like, you can mention my name. So, Jeff had asked me in a very deep conversation that we had, we were having some Terramana. We were celebrating the 12-year anniversary of ARCG Media. We were also celebrating the birth of his beautiful son, Julius, who was born on June 28th of 2025. So Julius Perez, God bless the family. And, Jeff goes to me, hey, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. And he goes, have you ever mistaken stillness for failure? And I was like, mistaken. I was like, I've never been asked that before. Have I ever mistaken stillness for failure? And I started to think about it. And I was like, oh, there was a stillness when my ex Ashley and I were on the verge of breaking up. And I said to him, yes, but now I know that stillness can be sacred, because it's not the absence of the movement, but it's the presence of faith. And my friend was like, you've been talking about faith a lot lately. And I was like, yeah, And my friend's like, that's interesting. So my friend goes to me, so I have another question to ask you. And I remember the question being, who am I when nothing seems to be going right? And I was like, I don't know. That's a question you would have to ask yourself. So he was like, okay, so I'll ask you, who are you when nothing seems to be going right? And I said, oh, your questions are very interesting, Jeff. And he's like, well, I got to ask you these questions because you got this podcast, right? And I was like, well, who am I when things don't seem to be going right for me? I was like, well, I kind of feel like I'm still me, like more raw, more real. And I feel that I am the kind of man that I have prayed so much to become. And my friend was like, wow. And my friend's like, the reason why I asked you this question is because, I recently had my son, and, my son's only been in this world for like a week and a half. And, now I feel like I have way much more purpose in life. And I was like, of course you do. You're a dad. It's not the first time he's a father. He's already has 2 other kids, but he's like, I didn't really think about this with my first 2 kids, but he was like, now with, my new son, Julius, he's like, man, he's like, I care more about who I'm becoming. And I was like, you should care about who you're becoming. Always. It's important to know who you're becoming. So, he asks me, what is the hardest part about the in-between? Like right now, like the in-between that you're going through with your ex. Because he was like, I know that it's been hard for you. I know that, the few times that we have spoken, we initially spoke the first time when you and her broke up, but where are you with this? And I said to him, well, where I am with this is knowing that the way I feel at the moment and realistically is that the door has closed, right? Like when she said to me in that breakup conversation, it's not our season. Maybe it's not our season right now. It's not our time. I feel that I've been wondering if I'll ever love the way I loved her ever again. Like the way I loved her, the things that I said to her, man, I said so many deep things to her. Here's the thing. When I was with her, I always said things like, on a daily basis, I love you more than I did yesterday. And it was a constant. It was a constant. And I wanted her to know that. I wanted her to know that I loved her more today more than I loved her yesterday. And that I was going to love her more the next day than I did today. And sometimes people would think about things like that and be like, and be confused. I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, I love you a lot right now, today, in the present, right? Let's say, for example, today's Monday. I love you a little more on Tuesday. And I love you even more than that on Wednesday. And by the time Thursday comes around, I love you more, because the thing is, you're supposed to fall in love with your partner over and over and over every single day. J. Cole spoke about that one time. You got to choose your partner. You got to find different ways of falling in love with your partner every single time. So my friend's like, that's beautiful. That's beautiful to know that you're thinking to yourself, hey, look, the door's closed, right? It's like acceptance. It's like understanding and knowing, realizing it, right? Processing it and coming to realization. But he's like, man, like it's difficult for people. I was like, yeah, it could be very, very difficult. So now we're having like a shot for his son Julius. And he asks me, what's something that you survived that you once thought that you wouldn't be able to survive? And I was like, man, like the answer is so easy. The silence, her silence. How she just, stopped talking to me after that one day in April of 2024. And I never heard from her ever again till this day. She was upset because she had found out that I hadn't followed her on social media. And she did the same thing back. And she was like, all right. And, the last thing that she said to me was like, you didn't have to, right? When I had brought up this whole situation of like, oh, I filled out this, this questionnaire that was sent to me, like some type of recommendation, right? Where I was asked by the Philly Police Department, like, do you believe that this person could be a police officer? And I filled out that whole entire questionnaire as honest as possible. So, when I tell her about it, she's annoyed. And I'm like, why would you give my information if you didn't want me to fill it out? Oh, that had to be filled out by all my ex-boyfriends. And I was like, we weren't together long enough, if that's the case. In the sense of like, do you really consider me an ex-boyfriend? We were only together for half of a year, so whatever. I guess because I was the most recent boyfriend, that's why I guess I got this information. But like I said, it was her silence. When he asked me that question, like, what is something that you survived that you thought you wouldn't be able to? And I'm like, well, her silence. A year later, I'm still healing. But you know what's the best part about that? A year later, because it's been a full year now since her and I broke up, that I survived. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it out of last year. I had to, if it wasn't for Diego, if it wasn't for James, if it wasn't for certain people, my best friend, Estefania, one of my best friends, Estefania, my therapist, and just those friends that reached out, in between, all those people that reached out, even the new people that came into my life that reached out or would just touch base with me about this. I don't know what would have happened. Because while she was out there doing her, while she was out there, living her best life and doing everything she needed to do for herself and possibly happy, like, yay, I'm free. I don't have to worry about a relationship right now. I was devastated. I was heartbroken. I was left to pick up the pieces all by myself. And regardless of the fact that she gave me so much advice during the breakup, after the breakup, that's it. That's it. You know what hurt the most last year? When she didn't reach out to me for my birthday after I celebrated her birthday so significantly. How special I made her feel that day. And when the 1 year of us meeting, nothing was said. Nothing. And, I had folks like my therapist ask me, like, wait, you expected something? You expected her to reach out to you like on August 18th and say something to you? And I'm like, I don't know what I was expecting. If anything, I think what I was expecting was, I hope she thinks about today's date. I hope she thinks about the fact that today we were supposed to make a year and we didn't. And then November 19th came along, and, her birthday came along, and I launched the Resilience Tribune. And I reached out to her that night and I said, happy birthday to her. And the message was delivered. But she didn't respond. She didn't say thank you. So it's like I said, the silence. I was with this woman for 6 months and told her how much she meant to me. And all I got at the end was the silence. So, my friend and I were talking about this, and he's like, man, like, you should write a book about this. He was like, you should definitely write a book about this, like some type of a guide that people can use in the near future. To talk about how you can be able to bounce back from resilience. And I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe someday. We'll see. And, then he proceeds to ask me, he says, Rob, do you ever think about what's next? Like down the line? I was like, yeah, of course. It's very normal to think about what's next, because obviously you have to think about what's next, right? So I'm like, yeah, I think about what's next very often. I think about what changes are going to come. So he goes to me, so what do you hope is waiting for you on the other side of all of this? And man, when he asked me that question, and Jeff, when you watch this episode, you're going to be like, yep. I literally had to document this part on the documentary. And for those that, know that, the documentary, The Resilience Project, had been finalized, I decided to add some extra to it. I didn't, when Diego and I started reviewing the footage, I wasn't content with how it ended. So I wanted to add on to it. And I went back and said, we're going to continue more. So for those that are watching on YouTube, those that are listening on the platforms that we stream on, the Resilience Project is not like officially over. We reopened a small part of it just to give you guys a better ending. Because, the way my mind works, and I kind of, I don't want to say the word hate, but I kind of dislike this about me, is I'm never content, and too much perfectionism goes on in my head. And it's like, I'm over here like, man, was I sharing a story of resilience or am I filming a movie? But, when he asked me that question, I got so emotional. And I was like, you just asked me, what do I hope is waiting for me on the other side of this? He goes, yep. And I said to him, peace. I hope that peace is waiting on the other side. A life that I'm kind of reliving this right now. But I'm like, a life that feels like home. A love that doesn't make me question my worth. Because it took me right back to last year when we were on the verge of breaking up. And I kept saying, when you love somebody, you just don't treat them bad, and you don't have them guessing or trying to figure things out, right? But towards the end of our relationship, she left me deserted. Days where I would just think to myself, like, man, what is she thinking about? What is she doing? And this detachment thing that women have, how they detach so fast, it's insane. And, one of the things that my therapist and a few other people I mentioned was like, look, sometimes when you're not with someone for long, the detachment is so easy. But for those people that love very hard and care very hard and have more, like, have more heart, it's very difficult to detach. So look at it this way. Would you rather detach now, or would you rather detach a full year later, 2 years later, 3 years later? It will be more difficult. So the next question that my friend asked me that night was, what if this waiting season right now, where you're waiting to see what happens next, is actually preparing you for everything that you prayed for? And I said, well, maybe that's what it is. Not punishment, just preparation. I think that that's what it is. I think it's all about preparation. And, I was talking to him about the last episode 34, with Ron Girini. And he said to me, because I also had James reach out to me and tell me that he had seen that episode as well too. And he goes to me, you know what I like about you when you interview people? That you mainly ask them certain questions. And the one question that you ask them is something like, what would you tell your younger self? And I'm like, yeah, I like asking everybody that question, or at least everybody that question. That's one of the questions that I like to ask on the interviews. So he goes to me, so Rob, have you thought about how you would answer that question yourself? Like, if somebody asks you, what would you tell the younger version of Rob Aurelius? I was like, yeah, I've thought about it. I've actually mentioned it before. I believe it was on the 1 year anniversary episode. But I said, look, what would I tell my younger self? I would literally say to him, I would look at him straight in the eye, and I would say, listen, let go sooner. let go sooner and forgive yourself faster. Because if you just sit there and you're just so hard on yourself, it just makes the process of healing much more heavier. And he says to me, forgive yourself faster. So yeah, because that's my issue, is not letting go soon enough. And once everything is, all the chaos, it takes time to forgive myself. A lot of time. And I don't like that. So then he goes to me, well, I feel like I'm interviewing you. I was like, I know, right? I was like, I'm going to let somebody interview me one day. There's going to be an episode. See, because Josh never got the chance to do that. When we started the Resilient Podcast last year, I was able to, in episode 2, I was able to interview Josh. And technically, whether it was episode 3 or whatever, Josh was supposed to interview me back. He never got the chance. So one day, one of these episodes, it's not going to start with hello everyone, welcome to the Resilient Podcast, this is Rob Aurelius. It's actually going to be like, welcome to the Resilient Podcast, this is so and so. And today I have Rob Aurelius here and we're interviewing him. And I said, yeah, I like when people ask me questions, because I guess the answers, they get more interesting as the time goes by, right? So he goes to me, look, you know that a few years ago, before I had my second child, I was going through something, because, he does have, and he gave me permission to mention this, he does have a child. I think it's his firstborn with another woman. And he went through a very rough patch after that breakup with that woman, because, they do say that, one of the worst things is a man having to separate from the woman that gave him his first child. And he had asked me, what is your advice to people in this season of waiting, like, being in the middle? And I was like, if I could speak to a few folks, and I'm talking directly to everyone that's listening right now and watching this episode, I want you to know that you're not behind. As much as you think you are, you're not. You're not behind. And you're not late either. You're not late to anything. I want you to know that you are becoming. And I want you to know that. So, we're wrapping up. I had to leave. I had to end up coming back home because I had to work the next day. Had an event with Dolce & Gabbana. And he hugs me. And he goes to me, Rob, thanks, man. I was like, thank you. Thank you for what? He goes, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for the gift. And I gave him a nice gift from Dolce & Gabbana for his son. Also bought him a bottle of Terramana. And I bought his son something that, when he's old enough to wear it, he's going to send me a picture of him wearing it. And I said, cool, man. And he goes, man, when are you going to have some kids, man? You're 39 years old. And I said, you know something, Jeff, people tend to ask that question a lot. When you're going to have kids, you're already such and such old. And I'm like, I don't know. And honestly, I'm not going by any biological clock either. And he looked at me. He was like, oh, really? So, trying to be 50, having kids. I was like, I'm not trying to do anything, but if that time comes that I have kids in this life, I'll have them when I'm ready to have them. Simple as that. I said, for now, just slow it down because you're already 3 kids in. I was like, give me the time to catch up. And he's like, all right, man. I was like, I can't promise you that. I was like, well, you better slow down because this economy is not the best. And he started laughing. He goes, oh, man, don't even remind me. And he goes to me, has anybody ever asked you the one question that you ask everyone at the end of every interview? I was like, oh, the question where I ask everybody, what is your message to the world and why? He goes, yeah. And I was like, I've had a few people ask me, but I've never really openly discussed it. He goes, well, since you're going to be mentioning this on your podcast, the next episode, tell me, what is your message to the world and why? And I looked at him and I smiled and I was like, Jeff, you're a good man and you're going to be a good dad to this beautiful, beautiful boy. And I said to him, my message to the world is that resilience isn't loud. It's in the quiet choice to stay soft in a world that wants to harden you. So remember that. Resilience isn't loud. Doesn't have to be. And he was like, beautiful. And, we parted ways. I headed home, sends me a text message the next day and says, man, what a beautiful conversation I had with you yesterday. Man to man. He goes, what a way to end Men's Health Month. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. It was like the end of June when we had this conversation because his son was born end of June. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, thank you. And, he was like, I'm thankful to have a friend like you in my life. A brother at that. And I was like, same here, brother. The feeling is mutual. So, we're coming to an end with this episode. This is one of my short episodes. And I love when I can have a short episode because the next episode, I'm planning to have a special guest. And this person is very close to me, very near and dear. Not going to give you any spoilers, but this person is exactly that, a brother. And one of those friendships that you hold on tight to. So I just want people to know that we have to value everything. And when I do these solo episodes, I try to remain on point because when I do the ones with people on the show, I can't really control how long it goes. But in this one, I can. And I have some closing words for the folks that are listening to this episode. But before I do that, I want to give a shout out to my friend and partner, Victor Melgar, who reached out to me last week just to check up on me and talk to me about a few things. And I was able to tell him that I'm planning this trip to San Diego in the winter. So he's out there now because he's from California and he recently moved out to San Diego. So he says, "Oh man, if you're coming out here, let me know." And I'm planning to spend some time out there. I've never been out to San Diego, so I look forward to checking it out when I go out there. But I have a card here from the cards from the You Got This that James gave me as a Christmas gift for those that are watching on YouTube. And the message on this card is, you are entirely up to you. For those that are watching, you are entirely up to you. Figure it out. You'll understand what that means. But on the topic of Victor Melgar, I want everyone to go and check out our sponsor website, nalahealth.com, which is right here on the bottom. And folks, if you're getting into holistic medicine, if you are a part of holistic medicine already, great. Go check out their website, nalahealth.com. It's ran by my friend Victor. Victor's got a lot of good products on there. He's got things like CBD, phytoceuticals, which is CBN, CBC, CBG. And a lot of people are going to look and be like, wait, what? What's CBC, CBN, CB? Check out nalahealth.com and you'll see it. When you check out nalahealth.com and you actually purchase something on the site, everything that you buy that's in your cart, 10% off of your purchase by using the code TRP10, courtesy of the Resilient Podcast. And folks, don't forget to always, support the Resilience Tribune and the Resilient Podcast by visiting our website one more time, resiliencetribune.com. And on there, you're gonna go see you're gonna see a section that says TRP Shop. Check out our merch. Support us with our partners out at For Your Wear. Shout out to them. Got t-shirts, got hoodies, hats coming soon, possibly coffee mugs for those that love coffee or tea. But I love partnering with people. I love collaborating. My first baby, ARCG Media, is exactly what the C in ARCG stands for, is collective. I love to collectively collaborate with people. So folks, before I end this episode, I want to get back to the middle, and I want to share this message with everyone. To everyone out there listening to this episode right now, watching this episode right now, to everyone in the middle, may you find peace in the pause, in the strength of the silence, and beauty in the waiting. I want you to know that you're not stuck, but you are sacred. And I recorded this episode not because I had the answers, but because I finally got honest about the questions that people ask me. The middle is the kind of season we don't post about, the kind of season we don't ever talk about, but it's the most human part of the journey, the middle. I hope you feel less alone after listening and watching this episode. So folks, that concludes episode 35. I appreciate you all for tuning in, and I look forward to episode 36, which is towards the end of the month. But for now, just remember to always remain resilient, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in one more time. I am your host, Rob Aurelius, and remember to always remain resilient. Peace.